Somebody said once, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you receive what happens to you. Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. This is Ben Kinney, joined with Bob Stewart and Chad Himes. I always try to mix up who I announce first. Sometimes it's Chad, sometimes it's Bob, just, to make them feel equally loved.
I'm more loved today, though, in case anybody was wondering.
I'm okay with it. You need it.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to think about our thoughts. Why Bob
we're
thinks
think
he's loved
about
more.
our thoughts?
That's
Yes.
deep.
Love
That's
it.
real.
I
deep.
love that. We're going to think about our thoughts, Ben.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I'm going to think about Chad shutting up, and the rest of you guys are going to think about thoughts. Why, Chad? Is because we're all a product of our thinking. You introduced me to the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Clint Swindoll.
Yes.
And he taught us a little something about thoughts on his podcast, Tell Me Something Good. What did he say about thoughts? Do you remember?
That we have a ridiculous amount of them, and most of them are negative.
How many a day?
Gosh, Ben, if I looked at the numbers, it's about 60,000 thoughts. I think I want to remember him telling us, and like 80% of those thoughts are negative, and 95% of those thoughts are the exact same thoughts we had yesterday.
You guys hear that? That you have these thoughts every single day, bajillions of them. That's a lot, ladies and gentlemen. And many of them are negative. And Bob, the problem is that you had those same negative thoughts the day before. Today, our conversation is about thoughts. In fact, Albert Einstein said, the world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking. Albert said, we can't change the world if we don't change our thinking. What are you thinking, Chad?
I'm thinking that over these last two episodes, we have given some mind-blowing quotes to our wonderful audience over there. I think Bob's still confused on the quote from the last one. And now here you go again saying, the world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking. I mean, these quotes are deep and lots of thought right in there.
It's because this is a deep podcast.
Deep. We went deep.
We like to welcome deep individuals into our...
I want the ice cream episode. I've been gearing up
Still
for
coming.
that episode.
It's still coming, Bob.
Okay, good.
You remember in the last episode when we talked about the UK cab drivers?
Oh, yeah.
And how their memorization of the city actually created growth inside their brain in the area called the...
Hippocampus.
I wish I had something called a... Oh, wait.
I do.
Good. that over time, what happened is they used that part of the brain so much that it grew.
Physically grew.
You could see it in an MRI, like in a brain scan.
They didn't have this big bump coming out of their head or anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what stands out to me is that, as Clint said, about negative thoughts, when you think negative thoughts, you strengthen what part of your brain?
The negative part of your brain.
Yeah. A negative thought becomes a negative belief. A negative belief, Bob, becomes a negative emotion. A negative emotion over time becomes our behavior, something naturally deep-seated inside us. You guys could probably think of individuals who always go into this negative thread.
Yeah, Ben, nobody wants to, well, I shouldn't say that. There's somebody out there who wants to be miserable and wants to be negative all the time. Yet the people listening to this podcast don't. How do they not have those negative? What can they do about it? Because we're having these negative thoughts, whether we want to or not.
Every one of us.
All of us. You're having them. I'm having them. Bob's having them. I know Dave's having them right now, just recording us on all of this stuff. They're all having them. What can we do about it, though?
We have to understand what are the negative thoughts that are happening inside our brain. One, we have a negative view of ourselves. I'm fat, I'm too short, I'm too pale, I'm too whatever, I'm stupid, I can't do this, I'm afraid. There's a million negative thoughts that go through our brain. What if she doesn't like me? What if he doesn't like me? What if I fail? Just all over.
Okay.
There's also negative thoughts of the world.
Oh, gosh.
What if the world ends? What if we're a step closer to the zombie apocalypse? Things are never going to get better. The economy is never going to get better. My career is never going to, whatever that might be, right?
Okay.
And there's also a negative view of the future. Not only are things bad today, it's never going to change.
And it's going to get worse.
I'm stuck.
Right.
And those thoughts are part of something that we call framing. Framing is a mental structure that we put around our beliefs or our thoughts that we have about ourselves, our future, the world, our circumstances, or even about other people. It's a structure that we use to give meaning to different circumstances that we're going through. In other words, it's how we attach meaning to an event or to a situation in our lives. And frames, Chad, can be both positive or negative.
You know, Bob, what I'm hearing is, as Ben's talking about these frames, he's mentioned many, many, many times, we were talking about it before, he's mentioned many times about this shape of the bucket conversation.
Right.
Right? So, I mean, are you hearing the same thing I'm hearing, that these frames are just basically the shape of our bucket?
Yeah, I mean, I when I hear that, I think the shape of our bucket can be changed over time. A frame is how we go at one specific thing, right? So like, we're going to address something comes up at the office today. I'm going to engage in that situation through a certain frame.
Okay.
And every time I have a frame for whatever I'm doing, right? The shape of the bucket says over time I can change how I would then, apply my frame to that particular situation.
Well, you know, I think what Ben's going to probably be covering with us if we keep going is how to return the frames we currently own and get new ones. Can we get a refund on the frame so we're not always looking at it that way, Ben?
Yeah, Bob, what you're saying is that the shape of the bucket is a combination of all of our thoughts. Chad, what we're talking about today is reframing individual thoughts,
which will then reshape that bucket.
Yeah, but you can't change everything in your life all at once. Like, you can't go from rich to poor, from sad to happy, or from skinny to whatever, right? You can't make all those changes. You got to make small changes over time, and they have a compounding effect. So what we're talking about today is how do we modify individual thoughts that we have about ourselves, other people, and our future? Because thoughts can either be used to hinder ourselves and hold us back, or they can be used to expand our opportunities and possibilities, depending on the frame that you apply. So we're going to talk a little bit about some research that we did. And specifically, I want to mention a lady who I've read some of her articles. Her name is Rachel Casada Lohman. She's a doctor. And she shared some lessons about reframing. And I found them incredibly useful to my life. So I want to talk a little bit about that today with you guys, if at all possible. And the first one that she shared was, our thoughts, they're just thoughts. They have no inherent emotion or meaning. That, Bob, you're the creator of those thoughts, and you are the person that assigns meaning to them. How you respond to them or how you interpret those thoughts, it's up to you. And her recommendation was ride the wave. You ever been boogie boarding, Bob?
I have.
You have. And what happens when you try to fight the wave?
You end up on the rocks.
Yeah, it actually pushes you forward. You can't do that. What are you supposed to do?
Ride the wave.
Yeah, just go with it, right? Dive under, just let it pass. And her recommendation is not to try to hold on to these unhelpful negative thoughts, but also don't fight them, because she said that they'll actually take you under. Is that the next time you have one of these negative thoughts, and it's coming crashing towards you like a wave, don't let it drag you out to sea. Rather, choose to ride it. Just let it pass through you, Chad.
Okay, so a negative thought comes to me. I'm gonna let it go right through me and out the other side of my brain, basically, if possible, using some of these reframing skills you're gonna teach us.
That's one thing you could do.
Okay,
and you've had us. I've read the Untethered Soul is a book that you had asked us to read at one point. And this is a concept inside of that book. It says that, Your brain actually expends energy on every single thought that you have. So when you have a negative thought that comes into your brain, and then you basically try to wrestle with that thought, right? You go, man, I shouldn't have ate those 3 donuts, right? And your brain says that, and that happened earlier. I could have just let that go, or I could be like, God, why did I eat those 3 donuts? That was so stupid. I ate those 3 donuts. I told myself I wasn't going to eat those. And you can like spiral on one negative thought if you just grab a hold of it and try to wrestle with it, right? What she's saying and what the Untethered Soul says is, don't expend energy on those negative thoughts. Just let them pass through. Otherwise, you can get wrapped up in those things.
Yeah. Rachel also recommended, Chad, that we step outside, right? Change our perspective by changing how we look at it.
Okay.
Ask ourselves, what would I think if I was somebody else in the same situation? Or what advice would I give Chad if he was going through this same position? She said that sometimes looking from the outside in can help you put distance between your circumstance and your emotion, all while helping you find the best possible solution. You ever heard the statement from people that says, I think you're too close to the problem?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you have an emotional tie, like you can't think clearly. So you have to separate yourself from it.
Can't see the forest through the trees. We're right in the thick of it. So what you're saying in this situation, Ben, is how do we advise ourselves?
If somebody else is going through the same situation, what advice would you give that person?
Isn't it amazing how many times that advice isn't what you're doing for yourself?
You don't give yourself the advice because you don't step back for a second and say, if I was giving this advice to somebody else, what advice would I give them?
Or it might be hard to actually do what the advice is, and you want to take the easy way, which ends up being the wrong path, and you know it if you would just stop for a second and step outside of the situation.
Next is find evidence. Ask yourself, what are the facts about this situation? What are my feelings? Do they match up to my thoughts? Or are my thoughts creating this into a much bigger mountain? She said that emotions can easily steal the limelight from reality.
Ooh. Say that one again.
Emotions can easily steal the limelight from reality. They can make mountains out of molehills. But if you go back to sticking to the facts or the evidence, you may be able to move on and let this particular thought go. Here would be an example. You fail at one thing or one thing goes bad, our thoughts go into, I'm a failure, I'm no good at this.
Right.
But you don't sit back and say, but the other 99 times I've done this, it went okay. There's just one instance.
Right. I mean, imagine a basketball player or a baseball player that every time I missed a shot or every time I missed an at-bat, that's what they focused on. The evidence has to be there that says, no, 50% of the time I still succeed in this situation, so I'm not a failure.
Sadly, I think about the stockbrokers that jumped off the buildings or the homeowners that took their life or did something dramatic, when in reality, it all bounced back.
Right.
The facts are that over time, everything comes back, right? That's what we've seen in the stock market. That's what we've seen in real estate. Even in bad breakups or other situations like that, it always works out for the better. And those hard times become the reason that we are great today, or we are stronger or smarter or better today, right?
And that's where you're having that stepping outside ourselves and getting that advice that we would give someone else if we're not looking at it so closely. And if we're finding the evidence, it's going to just become fact that it's not worth looking at it the way we're taking the situation.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going. What else?
Next step is, as you said, Chad, we got to take a breath.
Yep.
When we have this internal conversation going out, specifically when it's negative or pessimistic, then it's time to mediate the situation. Take a break, walk away, right? Or just stop for a second and don't allow those emotions to take over.
Yeah, I'm not good at this one.
No, right? Sometimes for me, I'll take down and I'll just start journaling my thoughts. How do I feel about this? What's going on? How is this really going to affect me? Who could help me? And by the time I'm done, I usually am in a better position to respond positively or reframe or handle the situation. Otherwise, we end up becoming reckless, impulsive, careless. It's best to slow down, consider our options rather than jumping on this negative thought. Now, at the end of the day, our real goal is finding the light at the end of the tunnel, right? Or as she said, finding gold.
Okay.
How do we sift through this problem that we're having to look through all the doom and gloom and to see the light at the end of the tunnel? Just like a gold miner, you have to sift through a lot of dirt to get to that priceless little nugget. Don't let unhelpful thoughts, she said, make you miss a golden opportunity. This is going to sound incredibly horrible to say, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Okay. Don't frame it now. Reframe this thought.
Well, our CFO said, I feel like you're making lemonade out of the current situation, the economic and everything that's happening in the world. And I thought about that a lot. And it's not that I'm winning more than anybody else, but I'm not losing, and I'm not allowing myself to get focused on the things that I've lost. I'm looking at the opportunities on what we can gain, right? Whether that's
a podcast that we've
podcast
created,
that we launched, or a wealth series that we did, or knowledge, or finding new talent, or looking for new opportunities.
having more time to meet with people that you never had the chance to connect with before because they were too busy and you were too busy.
Changing things that are in life that we should have been changing. So if we were to summarize some of her advice into just a quick list, it'd be, your thoughts are just your thoughts. Let the negative ones come and go.
Okay.
Step outside, Chad, and have a different perspective into your own problems by asking yourself, what advice would you give somebody else if they're going through the same situation? And then search out evidence or find facts to prove your emotions wrong. Take a breath, step on the sideline, give it some time, take some time to digest, right? And then when you're ready, go find the gold, find the light, find the opportunity or the lemonade in today's situation. And you're doing all these things with a purpose of changing your thoughts, reframing your thoughts. How do you do that? You got to do two things. Number one, you got to change the internal questions that you're asking.
Okay.
Well, think about that. What's a positive question you could ask yourself about your health?
How much weight have I lost?
Yeah. What's a negative?
How much weight have I gained, right? Or what was the right decision I made at lunch today? Or what was the wrong decision I made at lunch today? Anything along those lines.
Reminds me of the David Goggin story about losing weight. Do you remember that one, Bob?
Well, yeah, he realized he wasn't going to be able to lose, I forget, 180 pounds, right? He was just going to lose 1 pound.
Yeah, he wasn't focusing on the 100, actually, I think it was 80.
It was
the
80,
80
yeah.
pounds that he had to lose. He was focused on the 1 pound that he had to do to start.
Right.
So a good thought, if you're changing your question, is how much do I have left versus what have I already accomplished?
How many push-ups can I do in a row? Not how few can I do, or why is it I can
How
only do
far
4?
away am I from 100?
Yes, exactly.
Right. Change your questions.
Okay.
In wealth or in leadership, there's lots of questions that lead us down a negative thought, and there's lots of answers that'll continue to justify that thought pattern. There's also lots of questions that'll lead us down a positive thought.
Okay.
And it'll lead us to positive answers.
So you said there were 2 things we had to do. One is change the questions we're asking ourselves. What's the second one?
I kind of just said it. Change your answers. Change your answers. So let's end our conversation today with, how do you actually reframe things? What is, and I'm going to encourage you to do some Googling and going out there and researching cognitive reframing.
We need Bob to spell that for everybody later, just so you all know. He's the vocab expert around here again.
Somebody said once, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you receive what happens to you.
Oh, I like that.
Well, it's true, because there's a million things that happen bad in our world, but how you receive it is how that matters, right? Sure. Are you looking for the opportunity? Are you making it personal about yourself, right? When it really had nothing to do with you?
Okay.
This happens by you perceiving things in your world and drawing conclusions about it inaccurately. Like, my friend didn't come over to the barbecue. You immediately in your mind go to, my friend doesn't like me. They think Bob's a bad barbecuer. They have something better to do. They don't appreciate me, right? That's most likely an error. What is a reality of what could have happened to why Chad didn't show up to our barbecue?
He wasn't hungry. I mean, or, there could have been 100 other things that had nothing to do with us, right? Chad had an emergency come up.
Yeah.
Chad had got a flat tire on the way over. Like, I mean,
He could be sick. His daughter could be in town, right?
Yep.
But we go towards these cognitive errors. Now, once you take the time to realize if it's an error or not, what we have to do is that we get awareness around these things so that we aren't harboring negative thoughts.
I mean, there's some real easy practical tips, like the rubber band technique, right? Like every time I have a negative thought, I kind of snap myself with the rubber band.
I always forget why I'm wearing the rubber band. I don't know.
But, identifying those negative thoughts and just being aware of them, you do have to make it intentional, right? And that's why that rubber band thing is something people do, because it's the recognition of that negative thought, right? Just seeing it there and shining a spotlight on it helps you to ultimately change that behavior. But if you're just having those thoughts all day long and they just become kind of part of your reality, you're never going to change that reality.
I'm just sitting here listening to you say that, Bob, and I absolutely agree. And I wanted to just ask you guys, I don't think I have that many negative thoughts. Now, I'm not an exception to the rule. I have the same 80% negative thoughts that everybody's having. I just am not as aware of them. Is it because I've trained myself over the years? Is it because I just have a slightly more optimistic outlook at things? Is it because of who I've surrounded myself with? I don't know what it is. I have like guards at the gate or something that just are not letting the negative thoughts in, or they're escorting them right out the back before I even realize that they even showed up, I feel.
Maybe you've just learned to let them pass. It's the same way in our business where I could have 10 catastrophic things happening to me and I don't mention anybody because they don't faze me anymore.
Right.
But you could have one catastrophic thing happen to somebody in my business or a leadership team or one of our companies, and you would think the world is ending, right? But I have so much of that, I just let them roll past me.
Right. So it is possible to get to a point where you've built up that security, those guards that are protecting those negative thoughts from maybe coming in. But Bob, that's a great tactics that you were talking about for people who still need to acknowledge them and recognize them and move on.
I think it's, Chad, for you, it then becomes like, all right, I don't need to acknowledge them because I know they're not, disrupting me. But like, you start to maybe acknowledge when you spin out on one of those negative thoughts, right?
Sure.
When that negative thought's followed by another reinforcing negative thought, and all of a sudden now you're like locked up in it and you're going,
I just go for a run and they go away. So,
Yeah.
All right, Ben, you told us we should learn about these cognitive errors that are happening out there. You're talking about being aware of this. Keep going on some of these things we can do to reframe.
Bob made the mention of wearing a rubber band.
Yeah.
And what he's really saying is, how do I be cognizant of these negative thoughts happening in my life?
Mm-hmm.
And when I do I snap my wrist with the rubber band as he recommended? I used to have an jar in my office, and every time I said I had to put a quarter into that jar. It was overflowing with quarters.
I'm going to go back and listen to a few episodes, see if we can raise some money.
But I broke the habit of using because I made a physical attachment, a physical activity attached to this thing that I was doing. Well, another one is watch the words that we use. Here's a habit, or here's something that I found out myself doing. People were asking me, how was I doing? And I kept saying, I'm exhausted. I've been working really hard. And what I found, Chad, was at the end of the day, I was exhausted from working really hard.
Sure.
And I got tired of it. And I couldn't change how much I was working, but I could change the way I thought about it. So I started saying, I'm awesome. Things are going good. I have a ton of energy. And you know what's funny? I found it. I found my energy by simply changing the words that I was using and changing how I talk to people. Because when I told somebody, I'm exhausted, I'm working so hard, what did they say back to me, Bob?
Me too.
You should take a vacation.
Oh,
You should take a break. That wasn't possible, right? Or yeah, Chad, me too,
too,
right?
right.
And then we get into this somber, it'll be okay, we'll make it through this. Like
Yep.
Eeyore, you'll find your tail eventually, right? Whatever that might be. So you got to watch your words.
Okay.
And then lastly, the last two that I want to talk about is you got to look for those gold nuggets. You got to look for the positives. What's the best thing that could come out of this? What could we do to turn this situation into lemonade? Because remember, when you look for negatives, that's what you're going to find. When you look for positive, that's what you're going to find. Lastly, clean your dirty dishes. Don't allow things to sit around in your sink that start to stink, that start to grow stuff, that sits around and you allow it to create resentment or emotions or blockers in your life. You got to move that stuff out. What can you do to just let go? We recommend things like, in one of our previous podcasts, forgiveness.
Yep.
Saying you're sorry, apologizing, letting go, just finding a way to move through it so that it stops sitting in your head and your heart. When you get into this cycle of changing the way you think, you'll find over time that the muscle will grow, your thoughts will change, and you'll have an entirely different brain. I had this little pin, the button that you put on your jacket or whatever when I was a kid that said, mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Let's teach our minds to not matter so that we can move forward and focus on things that actually do matter.
And one of those things that matters are the lessons that we keep sharing here on the Win, Make, Give podcast for each and every one of you. So we're going to hope that you've joined us on Facebook, facebook.com/group/Win, Make, Give. We're going to hope you've subscribed. We're going to reframe our thoughts and know you've already given us a rating and a great review and shared the podcast with someone, whether you have them text the word podcast to 59559 or have them visit winmakegive.com. Until our next episode, remember, wash those hands, possibly now even wear a mask, and as always, do good.